and welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to go through how I'm making my 2020 Christmas ornament. My Christmas ornaments are going to be made, snowmen, and they're just made out of pine. And I take little sticks of pine. These ones are about 6.5 inches in diameter, or 6.5 inches long, or say 170 millimeters long by 40 by 40, or 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. Basically, it's just a 2x4, and I run it through the bandsaw to make them square. And once they're square, and I'm going to have a whole bunch of these blanks, I didn't want to have to use a ruler and mark crisscross on the end of it, so I made a little jig. The jig is just a couple of pieces of plywood with a little square that's the same size as the blank. Set the blank in there, give it a tap. There's a nail embedded in the center, right in the very center, and when you give it a tap, it puts a mark in the center of the 2x4. And so it makes it really easy to put the same mark in a lot of these blanks, and they're all close enough. Then what we'll do is we'll take the blanks like this. There'll be one piece. We'll set them between centers on the lathe. We'll put a tenon on each end. Then I'll take them back to the bandsaw and split them in two. Then I'll mount them in a chuck, and we'll end up with everything set up to turn a little snowman. So the snowman that I'm making for 2020 are this design. The hats may change, a little different style, but there'll be just a head and a body. I was going to make a 3-portion body, but for this year I'm going to try and keep it simple, and this is the style they're going to be for this year. The hats will probably have a few different characteristics, maybe some tapered, maybe some smaller, but that's the beauty of making snowman ornament. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move over to the bandsaw and we're going to prep some blanks. Over here at the bandsaw, we're going to set up to cut a few of the blanks, and what I like to do in order to get them set up is I made this little jig. It's just got a T-bolt and a spacer. The T-bolt fits in my track on my fence, and this has a little V-notch in it, so it just slides over the bolt, and then it tightens it up, and this gives me a relief fence, so that when I put my miter gauge on here, and I take a blank piece of wood. This is basically just a piece of 2x4, and I want to make the blanks all about the same length. I've already got a blank here cut, so I'll just use that to set the roughly set the fence. So now this just gives me a reference. So what I do is I slide the piece in up against this reference fence, and once I get to the saw blade, I've got some relief here so it doesn't bind the blade. Okay, and then the next step in prepping the blanks is to make them square. In order to do that, I take my jig off, move my miter square, and then I just move the fence over until the fence is just free of the blade. So it doesn't have to be absolutely perfectly centered, but it's nice to have it fairly square for the next step. So this is making them square. Okay, and then at this point I take a look at the wood and see if there's any imperfections. This one's got some cracks. So with the cracks in here, that's basically firewood. take another good look at the next piece, and they look like they're going to be okay. This knot may be interesting when we do the snowman, but that's what we start with. So we're back and we've got some blanks here that we're ready to go. We can use the little jig to put the center marks on. It doesn't take much to get a center mark on these on pine. It's a nice soft wood. And like I said, when I make these snowmen, I generally make in batches of 24, whatever. We have lots of friends and family, so it's always nice to have some something when they people drop by. Not so much this year with COVID, but we can send them and give them to a lot of our friends, and they really appreciate them. They're light, they hang on the tree, they look pretty good. So we'll move over to the lathe and we'll put these between centers and turn a few tenons. So I like to use a step center, and the step center fits in the nice little hole. Makes it easy. And we'll just go ahead and put a tenon on each one of these. And maybe I should put the other camera on as well so we can see both ends. There we go. And my tool of choice for turning these round is spindle roughing gouge. Spindle roughing gouge and a skew. And I'll start by doing roughing gouge just to get it a little bit round. So one of the things I like to do when I'm making a bunch of these at the same time, I like to put marks on my tool rest so that I can make them all the same length. And an easy way I do that is to take a piece of masking tape. And I'll just put a piece of masking tape on my tool rest. And then I'll take a ruler and say, okay, this here is overall is about 7 3/8. So I'll go down to here, set it on here, and roughly 3.5 is 7, 7 3/8. So about there. It doesn't have to be exact. But now I've got a center mark on the blank, and so I'll put a mark on there with the skew chisel. So now I've got the blank and it's marked off for 2 snowmen. Take this out. And I'll turn a bunch more of these now. Looks like that one's a little shorter. Now I can tell that this knot here is probably going to give me a problem, so rather than do anything, I'm just going to switch and cut it off, or just throw it away. So the next step is to go and take these pieces to the bandsaw and make them into 4 pieces. So let's go over and do that. One of the reasons I didn't turn it completely round is when I get to the bandsaw I like to have a flat so I can slide it through the saw blade a lot more safely. And I've got a good mark on here so I know where it's at. And so normally I would have a series of blanks, so I'd end up cutting blanks to get 24 of these. Okay, again, I've got marks on here for the snowman. I just put a piece of tape on my tool rest, so I have a rough idea where the body parts marks should be. And they're not hard and fast; they're just quick guidelines, so I don't have to think about it every time. They give me a pretty good idea of where it needs to be. So, without further ado, we'll spin this up and turn a snowman. one snowman. So I like doing these with a skew, and I didn't sand this one specifically because I could have sanded it while it was still on the lathe, but for the demonstration I thought I'd just turn it with a skew, and it's actually pretty smooth. If I hit it with 80 grit sandpaper, it would probably make it worse. So a lot of times I spend a little more time on the very top with the a little bit of tear out. I don't know if you can see it well on the camera. The lighting in here might be a little bit too dark, but because it's pine, it's got a bit of tear out, and so on the next one I'll pay a little more attention. I'll stop and take a look, and if I cut it with a skew, I can cut pretty cleanly, and it reduces the amount of tear out. Okay, on this one I think I'm going to try and do the whole thing with the with a 3/4 inch skew and see how that works. One nice thing to note is whenever I'm working with a skew or cutting, and we're cutting towards the chuck, you never want to run your steel into the chuck. So when I'm cutting this way on the wood, the first thing I do is I normally take a skew and I cut a V-notch in right in close to the chuck. What that ends up happening is when you're cutting this way and you get to that V-notch cut, any of the wood that's being chipped or cut away leaves, and your point of your skew will actually dig into wood. So you never have to worry about overshooting and hitting the chuck. Don't ask me how I learned that. I learned that the hard way, I guess is the best way to say it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it here, but now cutting with a skew, that's really nice, finely cut. It's there's no tear out at all. So a sharp skew and cutting in and just taking a real nice peeling cut can actually cut the pine really nice and smooth. So the bottoms of these have a little bit of tear out, but what I do is I'll put a sanding disc on the end of the lathe, and it'll just touch it against. It'll smooth off the bottoms really nice. And proportional wise, I get practiced try and get a 1/3 and 2/3. This one, maybe the hat might be just a little bit big, but the whole idea of it actually is a snowman. People will look at it and they'll immediately recognize that it's supposed to be a snowman. So that's about how I go about making my snowman. So there's only 21 more to go, or I guess 20 more to go, because I've got 4 of them there already. And like I say, once I get them all turned to this stage, the little nubbin on the bottom, I just put my sanding disc on the lathe and spin it up and just touch them on the bottom. If the top of the hat happens to be a little bit of tear out, I can touch that on the sanding disc as well. Put a little eyelet in, a little piece of ribbon or string, and 2020 Christmas ornaments are going to be done. So I'm going to do up a whole batch of them, and then I'm going to send a picture off to the ornament challenge. So when I get 24 of them built, a whole family of snowmen, I'll take a picture and send it off to the 2020 ornament challenge that Alan Stratton is promoting. So I guess that's about it. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'm going to post this on my YouTube channel, and that'll be at East Slope Woodturning. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Take care.